This is the Nephew observability meetings for Pacific time, March 4th, 2024. Okay, there you go. Okay, Piatra, you just joined. I just wonder if you want to. One of the things is we didn't get the chance to really go into your diagram last week. So do you want to slot that in for this week?
Again, could you repeat? You mean the presentation?
Proposed architectural diagram that you said you wanted to have a little more time to talk about, right? The one that you presented.
I mean, I didn't approve it, so I'm not sure. I mean, the feedback is welcome. So if you would like, I can show you. If you have any feedback to decide what is and what isn't in the scope, what is good and what is bad, we can discuss that. What do you think?
Yeah. Okay. I mean, before then, anyone has anything that they want to discuss? Okay. Yeah. Let's do that. Another thing for me, and other things that I do want to get off is for folks who are interested to contribute. I would like to get to some sort of milestone for something, a very simple integrations of several pieces to go. So I guess we can talk about that after Piatra. So you want to go ahead, Piatra?
Sure.
Okay, you can present. Go ahead.
I am not sure if there is anyone who was absent last week. Do we need to, I mean, do you want me to explain everything is what is here on the slide, or we just want to make a brainstorming what is good, what is bad? Do you have any questions?
Maybe you can quickly summarize, if possible, Peter, because a couple of people didn't attend, including me, last week.
Okay, so I have 2 slides. Just like I said, it's related to probably more broad topic, which we are doing right now in Orange. And we would like to propose some kind of architecture, but I'm aware that Nephew may not want to utilize the whole framework. But we assume that we have a heterogeneous cloud infrastructure, just like in Nephew, and we are running Kubernetes clusters, workload Kubernetes clusters. We would like to use Kubernetes operators to supervise the network function, just like in the Nephew. So we have the style is, we have the orchestration on top, and we orchestrate the operators, we orchestrate the infrastructure, and also we can orchestrate so-called the edge observability stack. For now, this is just a placeholder, which will be described on the next slide. I can see that we need to be scalable. We need to make sure that we select only crucial data. But if you would like to talk about the observability rather than the monitoring, we need to collect every possible piece. So from the infrastructure, from the Kubernetes itself, from the operator and network functions. And we talk about metrics, traces, and logs, of course, all signals which are described in the OpenTelemetry, because we think OpenTelemetry is a good way to progress, and it may be really helpful to produce something relevant. You can see from the edge observability stack here 2 arrows. One is local insights, and the second one is to push data to the central remote observability stack. So locally, we need to somehow decide, we need some mechanisms to decide which metrics will be stored locally, which will be pushed to the central cluster. We cannot assume that everything will be locally or everything will be pushed to the central, because it will be not scalable in the large scale. But here comes, let's say, the second slide and the hotel, which is for example, I can say hotel collector. And in details, the hotel collector, I'm not sure if you are aware, is composed of such elements. So we have receivers, processors, and exporters. We also can have connectors and extensions, but this is something which is interesting because it's vendor agnostic and tool agnostic. We can have a set of collectors, and on this slide we propose one of possibilities, but it's not the only one which can be utilized. So we assume that on the workload cluster we can have custom collectors as a sidecars to observe the network functions, which may or may not be instrumented using OpenTelemetry SDK and APIs. It's the same for the operator, which manages network functions, to have a deep view what's going on the cluster. Then we may have the hotel collector as a daemon set to observe each node of the Kubernetes cluster in the context of all Kubernetes resources or even eBPF programs. eBPF programs is crucial here because, first of all, it's high performant, non-intrusive. But the second point is that from my research, I can say that OpenTelemetry does not support the automatic instrumentation for the programs written in the Golang natively. But we saw that there is some solution to make the automatic instrumentation using eBPF programs. So it's relevant on a few fields. Automatic instrumentation for the proof of concept will be really important because, as I know, Pre5GC is not instrumented with the OpenTelemetry SDK. But going back, so we collect data per node and push the data to the pipeline which is collector per cluster. We push the data from the auto collector sidecars to the same pipeline, and it's realized by some kind of receivers. We can use many receivers which are existing, but we can build new if it's required. Then from the receivers, the data is going through the processors, and here we can enrich data, delete, which is not relevant. I highlighted here the data classification because it also can be realized here. And what I mean is that classification, what data will be left on the local cluster and which will be pushed to the central. So the data is pushed by the exporters, the same as the processors and receivers. We have a lot of those, but we can build our own. So from their data is pushed to vendor-specific metrics, backends. For example, Prometheus for metrics, or Jaeger for traces, the same for central cloud. The second thing is this local insights operator. I'm not sure if it's relevant. Probably it may be a thing, or we can assume that probably the open custom operator will fetch the data from backends. But the question is, and I don't have an answer yet, how to expose this data. Because when it comes to the data such as CPU, memory utilization, which is really generic and will be probably stored in the central cluster where we have some kind of API in the observability controller. It's easy. We can assume that there is a set of APIs, but then we come to the situation when we would like to instrument our framework to observe some kind of metrics, KPIs, etc. for specific network function, maybe vendor-specific network function. So I can see that we probably may have some kind of CRD where we define those, and based on that, the instrumentation is done. And also based on that, we somehow need to expose. So operator will need to know that something exists, because without that, we have some data, but it's just kind of mess, the chaos. Maybe one more thing about the management cluster. In the management, I assume that we push the data from the all workload cluster here. It can be do to directly to the backends, or it can be the push to the collector. At this point, it doesn't matter for me. Also, just like we have on the workload, we can have the daemon set on the management. It's not indicated, but of course, the number of auto collectors is in our. We can decide how to make this hierarchy. But the important thing, which is relevant for Nephew, because there are calls from the Nephew community, is to observe the Nephew components itself. It can be realized in the same way as the workload cluster, and the data will be pushed through the same pipeline, and at the end, it will be stored in the same backend. From there, we can use the data centrally for the management and orchestration. I'm not sure if it's only relevant for Nephew or some high-level service orchestrator, but here we have service assurance, preventive maintenance, data-driven orchestration, and etc. Such concepts, which can be also enriched with the AI or ML. So yeah, that's a summary which I had in mind, but the question is, what is in the scope? What is done wrong? What is done good here? And what are other challenges I didn't yet mention, or I don't see at this point? Any question, any feedback right now?
Sebash?
Yeah, Peter. Maybe I missed some part of it. So as I can see that you are putting the hotel collector as a sidecar, right? So would it be going to be a part of a deployment process that we will put the configuration inside the package, or will generate as a pipeline around the
We have-
hotel and
Sorry to interrupt. We have many possibilities. I didn't yet make a lot of hands-on experience. I'm also kind of pretty new in the hotel, but first of all, you have hotel operator, which is helpful for injecting the sidecars. Second of all, there is the emerging standard called OPAMP, which is specified in the auto specification, and it allows you to orchestrate the collectors from the central point. For example, it may be placed right there, and based on, and this server will take care of the orchestration of all auto collectors. I assume you may have some admission controller if you would like to, and make the injection by yourself, or you could put the collector in the configuration. The question is if it's worth it.
yeah, Peter. Actually, what I was analyzing, that currently we have the packages for the UPF, SMF, or anything. We have the packages, right? And we hydrate it, we inject the configuration, and finally over the GitOps, it will come to the workload cluster, right? So which exact place do you think is the right for the hotel collector sidecar injection? Like where exactly you are going to put this new configuration, or would it be going to be a part of free 5GC operator, so that whenever any NF deployment comes for the deployment, so that time you understand the requirement, and based on that you enable the sidecar. It might possible that in some scenario you will not put the sidecar, you will use some another mechanism. So yeah, those I think details, if you can uh, just give us like what do you think around it? I hope you understood my question, right?
I will. I think
Yeah.
so. I will try to answer. I believe the sidecar is optional, just like you said, because it's very relevant when you have your network function instrumented with the hotel SDK or API. If not, I'm not sure what exactly will be the role. But in the simple scenario, when you just observe manually or automatically instrumented network function, you probably don't need to care about looking from the Nephew point of view on the on the observability part. You just instantiate the operator which orchestrate the or injects the sidecars which are already configured. But when it comes to this, just like I mentioned, for example, some CRD which will mention what to observe, then we need to mechanism that before the injection we need to take the configuration from the CRD and somehow put it. I am not sure if through the
Yeah.
through the open telemetry operator or through this OP AMP server. I don't have that much on-hand experience to decide which solution will be the best here, and that's why we are trying to achieve at this point pretty simple use case
Okay.
and see.
Yeah. I would suggest it would be good if we could have one more slide which details out, let's say if we deploy UPF, so how UPF package going to be touched by hotel operator or sidecars, how going to be injected. So if that details, if we could see, I think that will give a good understanding, I feel. I might be wrong also, yeah. But yeah, that's what I was suggesting. Yep. Thank you.
Yeah, I have to say this is high level. There is we could probably put a lot of more components here. Definitely, even the selection of all the receivers and all the exporters, it depends on the further decisions, right? Even the processors, we need to process the data, and then we need to decide if the data will be processed in the hotel, if it will, in which collector, and if it will not be processed here, and which backend it will be, because sometimes it may be more efficient to process the data or some part of the processing do in the backend itself. So there is a lot of questions at this point.
Yeah, what another what another sidecar is necessary? It's not needed if you so originally there was a suggestion for sidecar because there was if GC has nothing to actually expose. So we were thinking of creating a sidecar basically just to be on the same network space and allows you to then expose the data when Free5GC otherwise actually expose nothing. But then right now in this diagram particularly, if you use BPF, then you don't necessarily need a sidecar on the pod. You may need something that collects the BPF related traces um, or whatever is being written on a table, and then instrument that using an OTel interface. That's actually much more what's needed. So you may have a per host process, or you may have a privileged daemon set, so they can read it from eBPF. So we use eBPF instead of using so recall a long time ago, not a long time ago. During the summit, there was one of the suggestions I had during the presentation was, in case FreeFileGC has nothing, the sidecar could be used to because the sidecar is in a network namespace. It allows us to do something like, I see all the secondary interfaces, and then I'll be able to read the stats off of the secondary interfaces. So that was the need for sidecar, and then that's need number one. Just in case the FreeFileGC something like FreeFileGC doesn't have any things that being exposed. But then the other side is the sidecar is instrumenting it using OTel interface. So those are the two functionalities of the sidecar when we were suggesting a sidecar. The second question is from Sebastian, like who's going to inject the sidecar? That's a completely different thing. You can use Webhook, you can use some other things to do it, but there are ways to actually inject sidecars without mucking around with the package or deployment resources. But then that's if you BPF, maybe you can just kind of skip the sidecar for now.
It's easy, let's say, to skip the sidecar itself in this specific use case, but then the question comes to my mind, how do you know when to skip? I mean, in the generic scenario, how do you know if the application is instrumented or is not instrumented with the OTel SDKs? Because I believe you need to somehow have this mechanism to decide when to put and when not to put the sidecar alongside the network functions. Or we just target one specific use case, the FreeFileGC, we know all the constraints, etc. So we decided not to do that.
So when I proposed the sidecar a long time ago, that obviously was targeting FreeFileGC A, and then B, I didn't think we would do BPF, partly because we don't expect if you sidecar, the sidecar isn't doing BPF because obviously not all the applications have privilege mode to run BPF programs or even read from BPF tables maps. But then now if you are using BPF, and then let's say we, at least for Netgeo, creates a very specific BPF, or use the BPF program as one reference implementations, and then creating an Netgeo specific pod service that would expose say service monitoring informations and instrument OTel interfaces. Then we have to see if the sidecar is an application specific thing. So I think one of the things that we talked about sidecar would be used would be getting invoking REST API calls to say AMF or actually web UI. It's direct to API AMF, but then maybe something else. And then that would give you subscribe notifications. I think I never actually get that far of FreeFileGC. I don't know if the REST API is that great, but then let's say the REST API is terminated by AMF. Then you may have a typo on AMF that would really kind of get subscriber information and things like this. I would much rather sidecars being used for that purpose, I guess, if we are going to go with BPF, because BPF gives you, for example, why do we need a sidecar for UPF? Because the thing we actually concern about with UPF would be more throughput information and CPU information, and then you don't really need a sidecar to expose that.
Yeah, in fact, even if you have your application instrumented, you don't need the sidecar. It's just a way to make it more, I am not sure how to say that, hierarchical. I mean, even in the sidecar, you could already put some processors, and it's probably only the way to somehow at this first point or enrich the data or remove some additional data to do not overwhelm this auto collector here. But it really depends on your needs. You can have only one daemon set or one one auto collector per cluster, but based on what you decide, you will have less or more data, less or more visibility on the entire system. But for me, at this point, this is the secondary discussion, because how you decide about this hierarchy, it's, let's say, easy, and based even on the experience, we can do that. There are other aspects which are really relevant. First of all, what is in the scope, what you would like to achieve.
Mhm.
And then, if you guys believe this mechanism is here to put some data locally and push some data to the central cluster, which may not be a trivial task, is it relevant for Nephi or not? Then how to define what to observe for the specific, how the CRD I mentioned can look like, and how it can be interpreted to, first of all, collect the data, second of all, to expose the data. Those are the questions which are relevant for me at this point, at least, to progress somehow.
Okay. Verada has his hand up for a while, so go ahead. Sorry.
Right. Thank you. Thanks, Peter. This looks like one of a comprehensive component diagram for observability framework. Sorry, I missed the initial introduction part. Are you telling, this is something which is there in the orange as a POC, or, something? I didn't get it. Is it something which is already there, or it's a proposed architecture diagram?
I'm in the orange, I'm a researcher, and this is the project I'm doing right now, let's say. The observability is something we are starting looking at, and this is just the proposition, the initial proposition. It's not yet on the place. I'm not saying that. We are trying to decide what should be in such solution included, what shouldn't be included, and only then we will go to the implementation part and implementation of all, let's say, mechanisms. For example, deciding how to make this data classification, or how to create or receive insights locally, etc., etc. So it's early stage of this research.
Sure. Thanks, Peter. Yeah, I understand. And there is one comment from Marcin regarding, sidecar in Kubernetes requires restart, and probably instrumenting the existing NFs would be an issue.
So in general, using I'm responding right now and typing, but in general, rotating, you can, so sidecar injections is obviously the most famous on kind of trying to solve this problem. One of them is obviously not something we can do, which is injected before you do kube control. if you do config control manually, which is not something we can do. And then the other one is using rotating webhooks to allow you to make modifications to resources before it hits the API servers. I think that's a hack. And then more importantly, managing sidecar in general is pretty hairy in real production environment, I would say. So yeah, I mean, I agree with Martin. It's not something I would encourage. I mean, I know I'm the one who suggested it in the first place last year, but then it'll be nice to get around it, to not having it, yeah, and then if we are, and then if it is part of it, it would basically, as I said, it would be an application specific one, so it already come with the applications. It would basically be managed by the application itself. That would probably be the best thing to do.
Yeah, so it's probably not the best idea to have a sidecar, but to precise, if we assume that, let's see on some workflow, we create a cluster, then we deploy the observability to be on the place. So for example, the hotel operator, and then we are starting to deploy the network, the operator, let's say. And with the operator, we could put the CRD, which mentions what to monitor, how to monitor based on, or I don't know, and at this point where this CRD will be put, but we are starting the network functions after the operator, which is responsible for the injection of the sidecar, will be started. So maybe it's not an issue. I'm not sure, because it's on the place, so it should inject at the beginning of the network functions instantiation. The question is if it will need to be adjusted or not.
Well, I mean, I think the bigger question is what do we want to use it for in this case? So if BPF is, so the original suggestion was done because there was nothing of regard using, as I said earlier, and then there were so sidecar is something that runs in the same namespace, network namespace, and then it allows us to get very basic informations, and then if we are having other mechanisms, we have BPF. If we are going to commit to BPF, and then there will be a control plane software on top of the BPF programs, either running a host on host or on some sort of privileged daemon set. Then this becomes the thing that would be exposing and instrumenting OTel to expose the visibility data, and so the sidecar functionality would be more questionable at this point, outside of any more application specific things that we may want to do. I know I once built a sidecar next to a network function pod, only because there's no other ways to nicely do configurations. That pod happens to we have to SSH to the pod to apply configurations and fetch something. So I mean, it's much easier to do in a sidecar. And so, but then that's probably not a thing that would be very specific to that particular vendor's application. And it's not, so in a generic sidecar, I don't see a very large use case now, if we decided to go with BPF. Because the idea would be the service would be exposing metrics and things on the application front. That was what we are kind of counting on.
Probably the best way is to just test hands-on, etc. And if we see that something is
Yeah,
missing,
yeah,
and
yeah.
maybe
That's all it is. So
sidecar
the
could
next level
resolve,
would be the next level would be, yeah, let's FreeFlyGC is the reason why I suggested in the first place. Let's see if we can do it with FreeFlyGC, which has almost nothing. So it's a good reference to see, in case you have nothing, which none of the commercial NF would have nothing. They all have something. But then for things that have nothing, it gives us a blank sheet of paper on our side to just kind of say, hey, this is the minimum set of things that minimum set of information that you can get by using the out of the box Nepio observability platform pieces that we can install. I think that's something we probably would like to validate and do on POC, hopefully relatively quickly. So I mean, the questions I have on your diagrams, like I had last week, is the need for a local collector, not the OTel collectors, but the local Fugloom collecting and backends in the workload clusters, and then that local analysis engine. Yeah. So as you said earlier, that red box. For some reason, I'm not able to see your presentation on as a host, but then I have to log in through another channel to see it, which is probably something wrong with this particular login so far. So yeah. Yeah, so the local insight operator. There you go.
Let me ask this question because I cannot hear you very well.
Okay.
You say that you are skeptic about this part, right? About my best backends and local insights.
So the backends, I wonder whether or not we need it on the workload cluster. The local insights, I think you said earlier that you yourself are skeptical whether this is needed. This is something that's supposed to, you need a proxy to send it over to the operators, the NF operators, the vendor operators.
I would say differently. Maybe I'm not skeptical. The question is how to realize that we have such component if it's needed, and the question then is how to realize this component, or operator itself should be able to take the metric and create the insights for itself. Maybe it's more straightforward.
I would imagine it would need to, right? Because your local insight operator is generic, I'm guessing, on this diagram. And then and the NF operators are vendor specific. So if I'm getting metrics that are specific to vendor X, then the NF operators right now, so far anyway, is the only thing that could possibly be able to understand metrics coming directly from vendor X. Right, because observability right now so far, I mean, with architecturally, we're not asking vendors to write another operator for observability.
No. That's why maybe it's too fast to talk about that. But here we come to the CRD, which will define some specific metrics, and this is a place where it could be interpreted, and it could prepare the data to be used by the operator. I mean,
so you're talking about metrics that came from the Nepio.
Generally signals.
Something that Nepio is going to expose. So let's say we take a we take BPF and then we expose a set of metrics, xyz.nefio.org, the metric sets. Then for this common set of metrics and traces and things, you want to go through this local insight operators and be able to. But then what does it do then, if that's the case?
No, not exactly. I'm not saying about, because we already discussed that it's not a good idea probably to try to make some standardization what metrics should be exposed, which shouldn't. At this point,
yeah, go ahead.
At this point, I just can see that we define declaratively in the CRD what needs to be observed. We need to find a way to observe that, even though observability will not be aware what it is, but then operator itself or such local insights operator, based on the CRD, will know how to fetch that data and what data, specific data for the vendor, let's say, is available. Because there is needed
I would have to say I have no such illusions that a CLD would be describing something to the level of in the level of something that beyond what we can define on what we have today. So meanings that based on NF deployment, which is the only thing we really have today, that needs to be supported across vendors, this is a network functions of this type. Actually, we don't even have a type per se, but then.
We no longer hear you for some reason.
This is a.
Now we do.
Okay, this is a very weird thing on. So this happens on the SDK meeting too. What happened is occasionally when my phone is so close, my phone obviously has a. I'm not using my phone, by the way, obviously right now. But then my phone has a Zoom app inside too, so that sometimes the audio get routed into my phone. I don't know why. Anyway, so yeah, I don't think we would be able to, whatever CLD we ended up defining. I'm guessing the CLD that you refer to, Pietro, is a CLD to say, oh, let's start observing this network function, right? So that is nothing more than basically. Sorry.
Not exactly start observing, rather than we can observe everything we know. We can put some receivers, exporters, etc. But then it comes to the situation where we have, for some kind of KPIs defined in the standardization of some vendor-specific KPIs, and I would like to find a way to describe that this needs to be observed, and then this can be exposed as through some kind of APIs.
So that's the part I'm not sure we will be doing. Actually,
yeah.
I think that was being talked about last week as well. But anyway, so before we get to that, Kieran has his hand up for a while, so go ahead.
Yeah, I think I mean, this is all very sort of theoretical discussion, and maybe a use case would be the best way to try and tease out exactly what components in this diagram we need. So whether we need a custom sidecar or not would probably be down to what it would actually do, and similarly for the local insights operator. But Verada also made a comment in the chat, which was probably related to something I would have asked as well when we talk about sort of 3GPP standards, which are already fairly prevalent in this space. Is this something that we're looking to evolve or align to, and so on? Yeah, so maybe a use case would be good to try and tease out exactly what components we need to try and solve a pressing issue that Nefio can add value for.
For me, the question was regarding the question about the 3GPP standards. If there is standard, it's easy, and probably many solutions provide the way even the service level orchestrators provide a way to have these insights. The question is what happens when the vendor have some specific metrics, because he have a lot of metrics related to the standardization, but then there are metrics which are not related, which are not standardized. Maybe it's theoretical discussions. I'm not sure, but this is the question to the community. I would like to answer such question.
I think if there's standards, whether or not we would be using standards to create a set of APIs that allows us to pinpoint a particular KPI that is supported cross-vendor. I think the question becomes a lot bigger in terms in a software framework. Nephew is not a standard body. In a software framework, if we publish a set of based on standard a set of KPI upon which everyone onboarding Nephew needs to support, so the observability would assume everything from that set of KPI will be available. I'm open to that, at least if there is if there's like consensus across the vendor community, at the very least. We should not be setting set of required KPIs on our own, because we don't want to like make vendor differentiations out of this, and yeah, we're not creating standards off of here. That's always a hairy point. So because if a standard KPI is being used, and a KPI is calculated by collecting this set of data and calculated this way for different set of vendors, instead of because I'm not sure actually that just because it's on standard body doesn't mean they must expose this. Every vendor must expose that KPI in the same fashion. So I'm not actually familiar with the 3GPP standards or the IETF standards that Verada said. So I can't say that for sure. But in the same format, it has to be an SNMP versus like some other things. I'm not actually sure if that's the case. And if it is, great. But go ahead, Kieran.
I mean, typically there's like 3 stages to 3GPP anyway, which is sort of general principles, and then the use cases, and then the sort of third stage is generally the specification with the protocol and the transport and so on. I'm no expert either, but that's my understanding, is that by the time you get to stage 3, you generally have some kind of data format and transport protocol and the actual structure of the, like in this case, for example, you'd be talking about counters or events and that sort of thing. And those counters and events would be very specific to sort of multi-vendor type of use cases, GNOB handovers and that kind of thing. So, I mean, I guess you could push for OTel aligned as a kind of a stage 3 specification, because there can be multiple solution sets for the different. At the stage 3, you can have different protocols and different transport mechanisms and so on.
Okay. No, but even then, I'm guessing, the 3GPP standards in the IETF world is not like, oh, we are conforming to cloud native standards, right? They're not exposing them as OTel, OTLP or whatever thing.
Certainly not today, anyway.
Yeah. So I generally, but I think does Nephew wants to support different protocol formats of collecting things across vendors? Again, this is up to the community.
Or is Nephew trying to solve some of the same use cases that 3GPP standards were put in place to solve? I guess would be another question.
So if it is already there, great. The question is, as an open source project, if something's written in a standard publications, specifications, but there's no corresponding open source project for it, whether or not we would it's a strong appetite of the community to implement that code. As you said, the protocol stacks and things, the protocol formats and things that the standard bodies mandated all vendors to conform to. Do we want to like implement one if one doesn't exist? Let's say, for example, in open source community. So, or at least the processor, I guess in this case, the processing part, the receiving part of that. So that's also an interesting question. And with 6 minutes left, anyone else has any questions? I'm sure that's a really big topic moving forward too. So I would, yeah, okay. I would actually like to, obviously, and Pietro himself actually talked about it too earlier, that we may want to get into just trying to build something so that we have a better idea what's next. So there are a lot of, as Pietro and other people actually discussed, there are a lot of things that are worth discussing for a very long, well, hopefully not a very long time, but a little longer term, like whether or not we would be consuming KPIs or turn something on that way. I would, go ahead, Kieran, sorry.
No, I mean, I was thinking in terms of coming up with a use case, and if we didn't want to go into the sort of 3GPP world. Yeah. I know the top of that diagram spoke a lot about sort of maybe observing Nephew itself, and maybe that would be a means by which we can build out the infrastructure that's required to support
the very simple thing, right? So the actual software problem we have to solve. In Free5GC, we brought up a UPF. Let's just use UPF for now. They just brought up UPF, and let me put something up so it's a little easier to talk. Can you guys see the screen?
Yes.
Okay. So in general, so a lot of things like, oh, can we turn something on, and this is KPI we're targeting, those we can put on the side, in my opinion, for now, and we should discuss that as a team, as a subgroup, to refine it. Some of the things that are on also on Pietro's diagrams is something like OTL collector. So the receivers could be anything that we kind of implement, or we can receive it directly from the target, the target workload. We can process it, tagging it, do something, and then export it. And one of the exporter, for example, is gRPC. So you can use gRPC streaming on the side for an operators to receive it. So I would propose that we are picking some technologies, and I think most of the folks from Orange were asking. Okay, they're saying that BPF would be a good technology to use, so that's great. If they're willing to contribute, that we can start off with using BPF to be the engine that would help us observe the UPF, and then on this forget about the sidecar for now, and then whatever things that are actually collecting from the BPF directly should be exposing that data through OTel means. So in that case, the collector on the other hand would be able to zip it, because you probably pack it into OTLP protocol, and we'll be able to receive it, and then we can export it to the NF operator. So if we get to so simplistically, very simplistically, the only thing we really have for defining today from NF deployment is capacity for UPF, and for UPF it's throughput. So if we can get the instrumentation, if we get the BPF program to give us information about throughput, or information about packet counts and timestamps, and someone will calculate the throughput. Either way is fine. And then on the receiving end, we are building something that would expose it through, say, gRPC. And then the NF operators would therefore be able to receive it. That would be a pretty good first step for pretty much the next several weeks. Then we'll have the basic framework in place that we know we can collect from a network functions that doesn't really expose anything in FreeFlyGC's case, using a Netfield specific implementations, which I'm sure also the BPF program also come from some other sources, and a control plane of that BPF program that would expose them using OTel means, which may be specific to us. A collector, which would be from OTel, but then maybe we have to implement our receivers, maybe we have to implement our exporters. We probably have to implement some sort of processing on our own inside, and then that would be a Netfield implementations that would be able to set something to the FreeFlyGC operator, and then the operator will be able to receive that information and compare that against an intent, for example. So for argument's sake, say UPF is CPU bound, which is probably is for FreeFlyGC. But then we're not sending enough traffic to really challenge its CPU utilizations. But then so in that case, it would be getting information from Kubernetes directly, which is also through OTel, about the CPU of the containers of the UPF containers, and also the current throughput informations, which could be in the form of actually calculated throughput or packet count, byte counts, packet counts over a period of time. Then we can. Then that's actually, I think, is giving us the diagram, the full diagrams. I guess I don't even remember which one has a full diagram. In terms of what workload clusters can do. In terms of workload clusters, this whole path, not this path yet, this whole path would be toned out, so we will be able to see exposing information. And for now, it could just be metrics. We don't need to do traces and logs yet, because for in the beginning kickoff stage for POC, we can just expose metrics first, and then be able to expose that to the operators, and then an understanding of the operators would have to, and then we can start dissolving what kind of things that are missing in terms of gaps. Do we need any interfaces, specifications, such that the NF operator needs to specify, I'm interested in something that related to this network function, and then how do we express that, and then enable. That means they basically subscription, right? So they subscribe to metrics that are related to this network functions. So that subscription interface, I think last week when Ben was here, he was suggesting a GNMI, and that basically is Yang. Yang would be the modeling on top of GNMI. And you know, I'm not a Yang expert, so I don't know how to express that actually even in Yang. But then that would be one way to explore it. But then the framework needs to be in place first, and then we only expose one thing, so we make sure that the collection is okay. And then two, we start exploring the richness of the language that we can do in terms of like getting. This is not that great. In terms of getting those metrics for the NF operators, because at the time when I guess the active pods and other things that may be interested on the workload clusters would be leveraging pretty similar infrastructure moving forward. So that's, I think that is a good first step for a quick POC that only runs on workload clusters for now, and then making sure that some system, some software inside workload cluster would be able to subscribe to metrics exposed by the observability framework. So that's my suggestions for folks that are interested. Let's get together and build this as a PLC. Does that make sense?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Cool. So one thing I was trying to pencil in Marston, because he's been working on and exploring what kind of data we can scrap, I guess, out of FreeFlyGC. Yeah. So if you and including generic data, so it doesn't have to be like FreeFlyGC specific. So if you'll be interested to actually take on that, I can do the hotel collector stuff just for an experimentation at this point. And then so I just wonder if you're interested, Marcin?
Yeah, sure. Just
Okay,
one thing. I was actually looking at Fluent, defluent bit, and getting logs out of the
Okay.
NFs.
Okay.
So, but you
You're-
said
you're
a few
way
minutes
ahead of
ago.
where you're way ahead of where we want the PLC to be initially, but then obviously that would be a good thing to do moving forward. But then in terms of like, let's get something moving so that we can prove that the framework works, and then we can expose a way for an operator, for network function operators to express what they're interested in, and be able to get them. Well, be able to get them first, and then that's just generic data that we stream by default. You don't have to turn it on; we just send it out, and then the collector would just collect them, and then the NF operators. I have operators sitting around anyway, so the operators would be able to subscribe to that. I think that would be very good first step of a PLC. That we figure out what to do now in terms of this is the way to do it, because after that logs and traces are also just part of hotel data, so we should be able to get that pretty much around the same, using the same means. Yeah, don't let me discourage you from exploring more stuff, but then in terms of let's get something moving, I think this is the first step.
Sure. Let me just finish what I'm working on, and then
Okay.
I'll see what's next on the to-do list.
Because if you have something already, let's say you already identify a BPF, open source BPF program, or something that does work, then you verify that it does work with FreeFlyGC. I think we can go with that too from the get-go. And the only thing really is your control software that are collecting this would have to also be exposing that using the hotel interface. But I'm guessing that's probably not even a problem, because even a service monitor is an hotel interface, right? So yeah, so we can sync up on Slack and try to move toward that. Okay, cool. Thank you. And then if anyone else is interested, obviously, yeah, please let everybody know on Slack. That would be great. And then we're 8 minutes over, so anything else from anyone? Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you all.
Thanks. See you.
Bye.
Thank you.